Hey everyone, so in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to set up a crested gecko enclosure. So as you can see, I have an enclosure right here that I'm going to be using for a crested gecko. So this is a 20-gallon terrarium and it is 12 inches by 12 inches by 30 inches, so it is 30 inches tall. Now, when you're dealing with a crested gecko, which is an arboreal gecko, that basically means that they really like to climb, height is really what matters. Now, when you have an adult, you're going to want around 20 gallons, and sometimes I think babies can be in 10 gallons, but it's always best to just start off with something that is big enough for its entire life duration. So that way you don't have to worry about upgrading. Now, what you really want to do is you want to make sure that everything you have, it has lots of room to climb, it has lots of vines, it has lots of hides, and you also want to make sure that everything is pretty much, for the most part, high up off the ground, because a lot of times the geckos will not go to the bottom of the enclosure. So most of your, I guess, necessary items like hides, food dishes, everything like that should be in the top half of your enclosure. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and wipe this down and clean off everything that I'm going to be putting in my enclosure. So you won't be seeing me do that during this video, but everything that I'm adding to my enclosure has been cleaned with just tap water. You don't want to use any soaps, you don't want to use any cleaners, anything like that, because that is toxic to them. So just regular tap water. You want to go ahead and wash everything that you're thinking of putting in your enclosure. Now, after I've wiped down the terrarium, I'm going ahead and starting with the lighting. They do not need basking lights, and they also don't need UVB as long as they have adequate calcium in their diet. I'm just using a regular 5.5 deep dome lamp. This is just by Thrive, and it came with the terrarium. And then I'm just using a regular 25-watt household bulb. Now, when it comes to substrate, there is a wide variety of things you can use for a crested gecko. You can use newspaper, you can use paper towels, you can use bark, you can use moss. Here, I'm just using a little bit of reptile carpet that came with the terrarium as well. Pretty much the substrate is mostly for looks and humidity. Now, once you have your substrate laid down, it is time to add all of your decor, your enrichment, and your necessities such as food dishes and hides. And I'm going to try my best to announce every item that I put in here, just in case you guys want to go and buy these items yourself as you see me put them in. Maybe you like them or want something like this for your gecko. What I'm adding here is just a desert basking ornament that once again came with the terrarium. Now, the next ornament that I'm adding here is, once again, it is by Thrive. It is a little tree trunk hide ornament. The top opens up so you can access inside of it, and it has a little hole in the front. It just attaches by suction cups. So I'm just adding that, and this is going to be my humid hide. I'm going to fill it with moss, and then yeah, it can be a humid hide that my gecko can go into when he or she wants to shed. And then the next thing that I'm adding here is a little shallow water dish. Now, as I did mention, your food and your water, your primary food and water source should be up at the top, but adding a little water dish at the bottom can give them an additional source of humidity. Now, the next thing that I'm adding here is a tall fern ornament. This one is Aqualand, and I just added this to add a little bit of height. Basically, a good way to connect the bottom half to the top half without my gecko having to climb up and down the glass. Now, after I've added that in, I am now going ahead and adding some of my moss. So I'm adding the moss inside of the hide, like I said I was going to do, and I'm also adding a little bit on the bottom. The moss that I personally like to use is sphagnum moss. I just like the look of it the best compared to other mosses. I've been able to find this moss in both a green and a yellow color, but I'm going to be using the green color today. Now, you can see in this current clip, there is a plant ornament that I never showed me putting it in. I must have forgot to hit record because there's no footage of me putting it in. But this is a Terra ficus plant in medium. It is a silk plant. What I also did in the clip was I added my thermometer and hygrometer. They're adhesive ones that apply to the side of the terrarium. They're not digital or anything. And I applied one at the top and one at the bottom. So I have those in there as well. Those are something that you must have in a terrarium. So that's just what that is in there. What I'm currently adding here is the Terra small jungle vine. It is a bendy, black, kind of bumpy vine that you can manipulate in your enclosure to basically do what I'm doing here and make it a place where your gecko can climb. I organized it so basically there was one straight path from the very bottom of my enclosure all the way up to the hide at the top there. Now the next thing that I'm adding is a small plastic plant. Once again, it's by Terra, and it is the Amapalo. And I'm just putting this one at the top so it can hang down like that. And now I'm taking this ceramic log, which is actually an aquarium ornament. Some people will actually use toilet paper rolls as hides, and so I guess you could say this is just a real version of that. So the next thing that I'm doing is attaching my Terra combo food dish. I am putting it up right here, approximately where the feeding door of my enclosure is. Basically, you just remove the backing and it sticks right on there, and then the food dish itself can slide on and off. Right here, I am testing just to see exactly where the location is. So as you can see, it is right under the food door for super easy access when I go to feed my gecko. I can open the door and place the food tray without having to take the whole door off. Now the next thing that I'm adding is another vine here. This is the Penplax Reptology Climber vine. And this one I'm using, once again, just for an additional place to climb. Now this one, I'm basically just putting it in places that the other one isn't, but I'm making special attention to make sure that there is a vine right above the food dish. Sometimes your crested geckos will like to sit on this large branch and kind of hang over the food dish like that, as opposed to being like right on the food dish or on the glass hanging above it. So I did make sure that I had a branch right above it. Now the next thing I'm adding here is, as you can see, it's a little wooden bridge. Now this is actually a rodent ornament. This is the small size. It is by Living World. So I'm just bending this into kind of a ramp, and I'm using to connect the top of this basking ornament on the bottom down to the water dish. I'm then also taking this plant ornament, which is actually an aquarium ornament that I'm no longer using. It is a silk plant. I'm not sure what brand it is, but I got it from Petco. But I'm just putting that in there as an extra plant because it worked and because it was pet safe. I knew it was safe to put in there. Now the next thing that I'm doing is I'm taking a couple clippings from this large Fluker's ivy, English ivy, and I use little suction cups with hooks to attach them into different parts of my terrarium. I've got one on each side, both of where I thought was maybe a little bit empty, and I want to fill it up with a little bit more foliage. Now once I added in those last few vines, I was pretty happy with the way that my enclosure looked. So at this point I added the door back on and I turned on the light to see exactly what it looked like. And I was happy with it. So you could say that my enclosure was all done. Now, like I mentioned earlier, there is no one way to decorate your gecko enclosure, whether it's artificial, whether it's live. That is personal preference and is all up to you. As long as that your gecko has everything that it needs to be healthy and feel safe in its enclosure, then that's all that really matters at the end of the day. I hope you really enjoyed this video and got a good idea on how to properly set up a crested gecko enclosure. This is the first time I ever set up a crested gecko enclosure, and is the first time I've ever had a reptile at all. So it was really fun to set up, and it was really fun to film and edit. If you want to see more videos like this, then make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified when I upload. But that is all for today, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye, guys.